Dunkirk is Christopher Nolan's latest epic and perhaps his most ambitious film to date. It's World War II, and 4,000 Allied soldiers are surrounded by Germans at the port city of Dunkirk. With their troops cornered, the British must decide whether or not they should rescue their trapped army or accept the possibility of a German invasion. It was this huge military misstep which Christopher Nolan used to tell a powerful story and make a war movie unlike all others. The movie achieves this in two ways: its non-linear storytelling and its bombastic sound design, which both help to bring you into the movie through a sensory means. Dunkirk is comprised of three interweaving narratives, from the point of view of the land, sea, and air, edited with such finesse that even though these events take over varying blocks of times, such as the hour-long air story where the RAF pilot played by Tom Hardy is picking up German planes, and the week-long land narrative of a young British soldier trying to find a way off of Dunkirk. And though these three different timelines overlap, you're never lost as to what is happening. It's the best non-linear storytelling Nolan has done since Memento, a movie that basically ran in reverse. It's clear that Nolan is not concerned with the chronology of the war or the individual motivations of the soldiers. He is instead focused on the fears and desperations of the soldiers as a collective and their need to survive. And as the film draws to a close, the cuts between the land, sea, and air narratives happen more rapidly, making you feel the urgency of the situation. And it is this discontinuous storytelling that illustrates the disorientation of war. And while visually we are led to feel uneasy, I would argue that the disorientation is augmented through the impeccable sound design. The film is an overwhelming wall of sound. You drown in it, it causes you to tense up, and jolts you during more violent scenes. Dunkirk is devoid of the usual gore that has been seen in recent war films, to the point that I did not even notice blood except for one scene, but even then it's barely shown, as the wound is immediately covered by onlookers' hands. Nolan chooses to bring you into the perspective of soldiers not through their carnage, but rather through a set of audio motifs, each of which serve a purpose, such as the ticking, which was heard in all the promotion for this movie. This sound is constantly heard throughout the movie. I'm pretty sure it was present for most of the movie, except for a few scenes where there was a deafening silence. The ticking reminds you of a ticking time bomb, but it seems like it's actually synced up to what feels like a heartbeat. As the ticking ramps up, so does your heart rate, creating a sense of restlessness and shock, as what immediately follows is usually very gruesome. Alongside this major audio motif, we also got the occasional snap sound effect. This was usually played whenever a bullet pierced through some sort of metal, say a ship's hull. The purpose of this sound was to jolt you. I flinched multiple times whenever the sound was played, and it was almost so loud that it was distorted, and it actually made me look away from the screen. And the screen I saw it on was an IMAX theater, and what was interesting was that there were these speakers underneath our seats, which caused me to have a more intense sensory experience. The chair buzzed from a low hum to an intense boomy bass whenever Nolan placed the camera inside the cockpit of the RAF pilots, and when the planes would accelerate, so would the bass, and you would feel as if you were right in the cockpit. And while we're presented this extremely complex soundstage, it's important to note how little dialogue there is, the scarcity of which makes it all the more emotionally powerful when there is dialogue. Another kudos to the sound mixing would be that during more busy scenes, it was harder to understand what the actors were saying, and I didn't mind this at all, as it just added to the realism of the film. Having a succinct script means that the bulk of the work is done through Hans Zimmer's tense and unresolving score. It creates a constant sense of uneasiness throughout the film. Sonically, the score is comprised of harsh horn and string elements, which never seem to diminish. The score ebbs and flows in intensity as we are reminded that the soldiers haven't got much time to escape as the enemy closes in. The overall score feels dark, but when the miracle of Dunkirk finally happens, the string section swells up and you can't help but feel relief. But it never seems to settle, it just stays at this moderate level of intensity as the film draws to a close. It seems like the chord progression never resolves, and it just builds and builds and builds. And I think that is purposeful, as it mirrors the sentiments of the British soldiers at Dunkirk, because nobody really knew when the war would end. As triumphant as the evacuation was, it was all still a military defeat, and there was the fear of Germans trying to take over. As such, Dunkirk doesn't have a traditional happy ending, but rather an ambiguous one. The war would go on for a few more years, which is why Dunkirk feels like the introduction to the dark symphony of war. Nolan has made the most atypical war film put to picture. Even though it doesn't have a proper linear structure, Nolan's impeccable sound design grounds the film, and I think this experiment of a movie is something you should experience on the biggest and loudest theater you can find.